Welcome to Debt Matters. We're starting today with just one number, 51.8.
Mm.
That's where the UK Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index, the PMI, landed in January.
And it's a number that, it tells a very specific story about what's happening in the economy right now.
It really does. So for a little bit of context for you, that figure is up from 50.6 in December.
Yeah, not a huge jump, but it's the direction that matters.
It's the strongest reading the sector has actually seen since August of 2024.
Oh.
Now, on the surface, this sounds like just unmitigated good news.
Of course.
Manufacturing is expanding, factories are humming, the economy is moving.
It absolutely sounds like good news. And, economically, in terms of pure output, it is. But, and this is a really big but for credit managers, growth does not automatically equal cash.
Right.
In fact, for anyone dealing with trade debt, this kind of growth, it actually signals a very specific kind of danger zone.
Because,
Yeah.
more orders mean more money, right?
Eventually. Eventually. And eventually is the entire problem. Eventually is where businesses run completely out of liquidity.
Ah.
The main theme we need to look at here is that more orders, well, they often equal more working capital strain, and surprisingly, a sharp increase in things like invoice disputes.
Okay, so let's unpack that then. We have this headline figure, 51.8. What is actually happening inside that number? What drove it up?
It wasn't just one thing. We saw a definite pickup in new orders.
Okay.
We also saw export demand increase, which is a key driver here. So the demand is definitely there.
So people are buying.
People are buying. But then you have to look at the employment figures in the same report.
Okay, and what did they say?
Employment is still falling. Now, it is falling at a slower pace than it was before, but companies are not rushing out to hire new staff. Despite all this busyness, they're being cautious.
That seems like a contradiction, doesn't it? You've got more work, but fewer people, or at least you're not adding people to do the extra work.
It reflects a kind of hesitancy. Businesses are happy to take the orders, absolutely, but they're not confident enough to go and increase their fixed overheads, their payroll, just yet.
I see.
And then you have to look at the other side of the ledger, costs. Input costs rose sharply in January.
And what are we talking about specifically with costs? What's going up?
Oh, the usual suspects, unfortunately. Raw materials, energy, and labor costs. Even if they aren't hiring new people, the cost of their existing labor and the materials they need to fulfill these new orders has gone up.
And what about business confidence?
It improved. Overall, people feel better about the future. But, feeling better about the future doesn't pay the electricity bill today.
Okay, so that's the landscape. Orders up, costs up, employment is a bit stagnant, but confidence is high. Why? Why does this create a problem for the person sitting in the finance office trying to collect on a debt?
Well, we call it the mechanism of manufacturing growth. It's really all a timing issue. Just think about a factory floor. When you get busier, what's the very first thing you have to do?
You've got to buy the stuff to make the product.
Exactly. You have to buy more raw materials. You have to commit to higher energy usage to run the machines longer. You might have to pay overtime to your existing staff because you didn't hire new ones. All of that cash goes out the door now,
Right.
today. But you invoice later, and you get paid even later than that.
That is a gap.
A massive gap. And when costs are rising sharply like they are now, that gap just widens. You're paying more upfront than you used to service an order that won't pay you back for 30, 60, sometimes 90 days. That creates a cash crunch.
I see. So the company isn't failing, they're just stretched.
They're illiquid. And that changes their behavior completely. When cash gets tight because of these upfront costs, customers start managing their outgoing payments much more aggressively. They have to.
Managing outgoing payments aggressively.
Yeah.
That sounds like a very polite way of saying not paying people.
It is a polite way of saying they are prioritizing who gets paid and when. And this brings us to the first big implication for debt collection, the sales versus cash gap.
More sales, slower cash.
Precisely. And you need to be watching for the signs. The first sign is always the pay next week promise.
Ah, the classic delay.
It's subtle, They're not saying we can't pay. They're saying we will pay, just not today. They're just buying time to let some cash come in from somewhere else.
And another sign.
Part payments.
So just paying a fraction of the invoice.
Yes. They might pay, say, 50% of an invoice just to keep you quiet or to keep their supplies moving while holding back the rest. It's a real balancing act for them.
And I imagine you also see more formal requests to change terms.
Absolutely. A customer who has always paid on 30 days might suddenly come to you and ask for 45 or 60.
Because they're waiting for their own customers to pay them.
Correct. They're just trying to match their outflows to their inflows. But if you're the creditor, that just moves the problem onto your balance sheet.
So that brings us to the second implication, which I think is really critical here. Disputes.
Hmm.
You mentioned that growth leads to more disputes. That feels counterintuitive. If I'm buying more from you, shouldn't our relationship be getting better?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But remember those cost pressures we talked about? Input costs are rising.
Right. Materials, energy.
So when those costs rise, suppliers usually try to pass them on. They have to. They implement price uplifts.
And buyers hate that.
Buyers hate that.
Yeah.
So rising input costs connect directly to relationship friction. When prices go up, buyers push back, they scrutinize the invoice, they start looking for reasons, any reason, not to pay the full amount.
So what looks like a simple transaction suddenly becomes an argument.
Exactly. You start seeing arguments about price uplifts. Things like, I never agreed to that new rate, or that wasn't in our original contract. But it goes deeper. When cash is tight, buyers will use delivery or quality claims as leverage.
So you're saying they'd use a small defect to delay paying for the whole shipment?
Or even just a perceived defect, or a slight delay in delivery, anything to hold onto their cash for another week. And then, of course, there are the administrative delays.
The dog ate my homework of the corporate world.
Pretty much. We're missing the PO. We need the GRN, the goods received note, the invoice reference is wrong. These excuses just skyrocket when a company is trying to slow down its cash outflow.
It's amazing how often a purchase order can go missing right when cash flow is tight.
It's a remarkable coincidence, isn't it? But for a collector, you have to treat these not just as simple admin errors, but as tactical delays.
Now, we also touched on exports. The data show that export demand picked up. Surely that has to be a positive.
It's positive for volume, it's positive for the factory floor, but for the finance team, exports just add another layer of complication.
How so?
Length. The payment chain is it's longer, the physical goods take longer to arrive, the paperwork is more complex. There are so many more handover points where things can go wrong.
Points of failure.
Exactly. If a document is missing at customs, payment stalls. If the goods get held up at a port, the customer doesn't sign off, and payment stalls. Domestic trade is relatively quick. Export trade, just by its nature, has a much longer cycle. So while the volume is great, the cash conversion is slower.
Okay, so we have this environment. Busy factories, really tight cash, rising costs, longer export chains. Who's feeling the pain the most? Which sectors are the most vulnerable right now?
You have to look at the supply chain hierarchy. The first group, obviously, is the manufacturers themselves and their tier suppliers.
The people actually making the things.
Yes, they're the ones seeing the higher volumes. But remember, their costs, energy, raw materials are rising. If those costs rise faster than their ability to raise their own prices, what we call their pricing power, their cash position tightens up immediately. They get squeezed right in the middle.
So they're busy, but they're not making as much margin.
Or the margin is shrinking fast. Then you have a group that's often overlooked, logistics and packaging.
Yeah, the mid-chain firms.
Yeah.
The movers and the boxers.
That's them. The companies that move the goods and wrap the goods. They get very, very busy when manufacturing picks up. But here's the trap. They often get paid last.
Why is that?
Well, because they're service providers at the end of the process. The manufacturer pays for the raw materials first, because without them, they can't make the product.
Makes sense.
They pay the energy bill, because otherwise the lights go out. The logistics guy, he can probably wait a week.
That seems incredibly risky for those logistics firms.
It is. They can easily become late payers themselves, not because they're badly run, but because they are waiting on the manufacturers who are waiting on their own customers. It's a real contagion effect.
And you mentioned the third group.
Yeah, the energy and labor-heavy operators. So firms where the non-negotiable bills make up the biggest part of their expenses.
You can't really negotiate with the electric company.
And you certainly can't negotiate with your staff about payday. You must pay staff and you must pay for electricity. Those are immediate hard cash outflows.
So if I'm a supplier to one of these firms, say I sell them office supplies or maintenance services, where do I stand in that queue?
You are at the back of the line. Because they have prioritized payroll and their critical utilities. Trade creditors are, frankly, the easiest lever for them to pull when they need to preserve cash.
That is a very sobering picture. But let's pivot to strategy. We know this environment. We know the PMI is at 51.8. We know what that implies for cash flow. How does a creditor protect themselves? What's the playbook here?
You can't just sit back and hope for the best. You need a proactive strategy. And the very first step is segmentation.
So breaking down the list of who owes you money.
Your whole ledger. You just cannot treat every customer the same way. We advise breaking them down into 3 specific categories, A, B, and C.
Okay, walk us through those.
Category A are your good citizens. These are the customers who pay on time every time. You don't really need to worry about them.
Okay, simple enough.
Category C are your problem children. These are the customers who are already 30-plus days late, or they are those repeat disputers we talked about. They require a very specific, often a pre-legal approach.
And in the middle, category B.
Category B, this is where the battle is won or lost. These are the customers who are trending, say, 7 to 21 days late. They're slipping.
So they used to be A's, but they're now drifting.
Exactly. And this brings us to the second strategy, the move fast rule. You must focus your energy, your time, on Group B.
Why focus there and not on the really late ones in Group C?
Because Group B is salvageable. The goal is to stop them from drifting into Group C. Once a customer is 30 days late, it becomes much, much harder to recover the relationship and the cash. But at 7 or 10 days late, you can still intervene effectively.
What does that intervention look like? It's not just a friendly reminder.
No, it's not just a friendly check-in. You need to push for a dated payment plan, and it has to be in writing.
In writing.
Verbal promises, they just vanish into thin air. I'll pay you next week means nothing. You need an email that says, we will release payment of X amount on this specific date. You cannot accept vague promises.
Okay, so that deals with the late payers. But what about those tactical disputes, the missing PO excuse? How do we stop that before it even starts?
Strategy 3, preempting disputes. You have to be proactive. You cannot wait until the invoice is due to find out there's some kind of problem.
So don't wait 30 days to make the first call.
No. My process is this. Right after invoicing, a day or two later, you confirm the data.
You call them up.
You call or you email, you check. Is the purchase order valid? Do you have the delivery note? Has the goods received status been updated in your system?
You're basically asking them to check their homework before the test.
Essentially, you confirm all the invoice references are correct before the due date. That way, when day 30 comes around, they can't turn around and say, oh, sorry, we don't have the paperwork. You've stripped that excuse away from them 3 weeks ago.
That requires a bit more work up front, for sure. But it sounds like it saves a lot of pain later.
It saves an immense amount of time chasing.
Finally, you mentioned structure, a structured escalation process. What does that look like in practice?
It creates a rhythm, a cadence that the customer learns to respect. We suggest a specific timeline, day 7 overdue, chase and call.
And you said call, don't just email.
Pick up the phone, make it human. Then day 14. If they still haven't paid, you demand a plan or you put a hold on future supply.
Oof, that's a tough conversation, putting a customer on hold.
It is, but you have to remember, if they're busy and they're growing, which the PMI data suggests they are, they need your supplies. Stopping their supply is your strongest piece of leverage. You have to be willing to use it.
And if that still doesn't work?
Day 21, final demand or pre-legal action. You have to show that there are consequences to not paying. If you're inconsistent, they'll just prioritize the supplier who is consistent.
Okay, so to summarize everything we've covered, manufacturing is improving. That 51.8 PMI figure is real. But rising costs and this admin friction are driving late payment behavior.
Precisely. Busier customers do not mean safer debt. In fact, right now, it often means the exact opposite.
It's a paradox, isn't it? We want our customers to grow, but we need to be able to survive their growth.
You have to survive the transition. Growth burns cash.
Yeah.
And your job as a creditor is to make sure they aren't burning your cash to fuel it.
So here's the challenge for you listening. If your customers are getting busier, if you see the trucks leaving their factory and the lights are on late, why are the delays still happening?
And more importantly, what will you change first? Will it be your terms, your process for checking invoices, or will it be your escalation timing? Because if you don't change one of them, you are financing their growth for free.
And that's the thought worth holding on to. Thanks for listening to Debt Matters.